So welcome everyone. This is a class on, yeah, got somebody coming in. Sorry, hold on. Hi, Luz.
Yes, hello. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, nice to have you.
Thank
Where
you.
where
Nice
are
to
you
be
coming
here.
from? Where are you coming from?
I'm in Taos, New Mexico.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. So tonight's class is what's your vision for the future? And we're going to look at how we can bring our best to the world. And the purpose for this class and all the classes we teach really is to grow our consciousness, right? We want to become as conscious as we can become. And it's good to know what that means and how we go about doing that. We grow our consciousness by in a couple of different ways. One way is we get rid of some of the filters that we have. And another way is by actively looking. So our filters kind of govern what we're able to see, and our act of looking enables us to pierce through the illusions that we're presented with by our conditioning, our cultural conditioning, our our presuppositions, the things that we believe. Hold on a second, I'm going to mute everybody. I'm going to mute everybody for a little bit, and then if you want in, just wave your hand, and I'll unmute you, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay. Okay. So sorry, I got a little bit of housekeeping to do here. All right. So about growing our consciousness, and that's what the Holy Order of Man's really is about. Where we want to become more of who we are. We want to access those parts of us that really are kind of dormant within us, because as human beings we have this apparatus to work with, our body, and the body is perfectly attuned with the earth because it comes from the earth, right? We are inseparable from nature in our body, but there's part of us that transcends the body, but we're not usually aware of it. We're not used to using our senses in a way that lets us see past physical reality. So what our teachings do through devotion to God and through learning the principles as taught in the Bible, we regard the Bible as a handbook for life. And as a handbook, it tells us a lot about our physical body, how it works. And one of the things that Jesus said was, if we keep our eyes single, our whole body will be full of light. And I want you to know that when we use words like light, we don't mean understanding. We're not using it as a metaphor. We're talking about literal light. But because we know a little bit about science, we know that the light that we see is just a small portion of the light that comes to us from the sun. So becoming more conscious as we awaken the different parts of us in our senses, in the brain, in the other parts of us, that we're able to see a greater, we're able to see more of the spectrum of light. And one of the things that we get to see is what you might call the light of life. So this is a principle. This is one of the main principles I'd like you to get, because it informs most of what we study. Most of what we learn in the Holy Order of Man's has to do with light as a manifestation of the power of life within us. So if we could see that life power, we would see it as a radiant light. We would see the aura around the body. We would see the level of vitality in a person simply by how much light was radiating from their body. And when we start to open our sight in that way, then all of nature starts to look different, because we can see in more ways than with our eyes. And this can be kind of a difficult concept, but not if you think about it. Because if you're in a forest, for instance, you're feeling the life of the forest in more ways than just your sense of smell and your sense of sight and your touch, all of those normal senses. You sense that the place is alive, that everything is alive, and not just glowing with the light of life, but glowing with, there's a level of consciousness there. And for instance, like you see a field of sunflowers, and they have those enormous, blossoms with the face. And throughout the day, those faces will follow the sun across the sky. They literally turn on their stalk, which is quite amazing, really. And that's called heliotropism. And that is a level of consciousness. It's not self-conscious, it's rather automatic, but there is an aliveness in that plant that is particular to that plant. And it knows how to be a sunflower. It comes with its own intelligence. So one of the things that happens as we grow our consciousness is that we start to become aware of the intelligence of nature, that all around us, everything is conscious. Everything has intelligence, even down to the elements of, on the periodic table of the elements in chemistry. Every atom is intelligent because it knows exactly what to do. So as we become more conscious, these kinds of realizations start to come to us. But the most pressing realization, and the one that's most important, is this awareness of life, of the power of life. And this is where we talk about the sun being the Christ, the Christ being, in that all of our light, all of our life comes from the sun. We are literally in the body of the sun, because the rays of the sun completely fill the solar system. We are inside of it, and this light that comes to us has intelligence within it. It's like everything that is alive on this planet is a response to that intelligence that the entire planet is bathed in. So it's like it's in the air. And everything that we see of as different species of plants and animals and trees and flowers, all of these things, there's specific manifestations of a particular combination of intelligences. That's why each species is different. It's as though the whole thing is in a creative mode, right? Everything is seeking its own expression, a particular combination of elements and of energies, trying to discover its own beingness. Now this is really a different way to look at life, right? Because we've been taught different things, like the theory of evolution, where things develop randomly, through random mutation, and those mutations that are better adapted to the environment win out. But this is a different way to think of it, in that, yes, there's evolution, but it's everything participates in that evolution. There is this spirit within all of life that wants to know itself, and it wants to know the full range of its own possibilities. One of the things we say is, man, know thyself, comes from the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece. And we know about ourselves that when we're not constrained by too many hardships, that the spirit of being a human being is that we want to explore, we want to express. We sing, we dance, we write poetry, we go places, we build things, and we're always seeing the potential within the material of the earth. We see what it can be. We don't just see what is. We look at something and we think, well, what can be done with this? How can we combine different things and come up with something not just useful, which is, that's good, but something beautiful. Some of the earliest artifacts that archaeologists dig up have no purpose. I have this thing. You see, you know what this does? Absolutely nothing. Doesn't do a thing. But it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. I really like it. I saw it. I had to have it. And so many things are like that. We have the ability, not just the ability, but the desire to create beauty. So this is something that not only sets us apart, but if we want to know about God, then if we know that about ourselves, then that tells us something about God, because that's a principle. As above, so below. We know ourselves, we know God. We know God, we know more about ourselves. And one of the things that we like to do is to create beauty. And so that gives a whole, do you see how that shifts this whole idea of evolution out of simply a utilitarian mindset, this way of understanding? We want to increase and develop our understanding. And this is one of the ways to do it. We look at creation as being alive, and that it has a spirit within it. And that spirit is a spirit of exploration. It's a spirit of self-expression. It's the spirit of discovering one's own inner potential. What's possible? You might even call this the Holy Spirit. It's like it infuses everything. What's possible? Now, this is unconventional. It's an unconventional way to look at God, but I'm offering it to you as an alternative and a way so that you can easily dispense with all of the useless and destructive ways that we tend to regard God in. God as a dictator, God as a cruel punisher, God who would send a person to everlasting fire and damnation for missing Mass on Sunday, or for doing some other, violating some other rule. I mean, this is, I don't know about you, but when I was like 12 years old, I realized that's not a God that I can worship. That these are like distortions and just twisted ways to look at God and look at ourselves. So to take that and just dispense with it, just get rid of that stuff. God is not a cruel dictator. God doesn't even punish us God is loving. And so what does that mean? God loves us in the way that we partake of that spirit of self-discovery, that spirit of aliveness, the spirit of finding what's possible and expanding into it. You see, this is a good starting point. If you can start from that point, all of the theology and the limiting ways of looking at God, you can just get rid of those and find joy in being alive, to find your vitality and find ways of expressing it. And once you become conscious of the power of life within you, then you begin to realize when you're in nature and you look around, you see that, well, everything else is alive. I share in that life. That I'm not just a biochemical machine that's alive because of the chemistry that's going on inside me. No, the chemistry is incidental. The body itself is incidental, because the life energy in the body is the same life energy that's in every living thing on this planet. It's the same life. It all comes from one place. It comes from the sun, but not the one that's 93 million miles out there, but the one that's right in the center of every living thing. See, again, this is the mystical approach to God, not the religious approach. So, and the way to get there is to become aware of the light of life. And this is really, it's not so hard to do, because when we go within and we get in touch with the way that life energy is moving in our bodies, and then we ask ourselves, what does that look like? What does that energy look like? And all you have to do is look in its direction, and it starts to glow. It starts to show itself for what it is. And what it is, it's not just energy, it's like a presence. It's a light that lights itself from within itself. And that's what we are. So if you rise up in consciousness and you just set your mind to developing your consciousness, to open up, and of course aided with the proper understanding of these things, which is way different from what the churches teach and what most people understand as religion. This is way different. These are the ancient mystery teachings, and that's what we teach in the Holy Order of Mans, is the ancient mystery teachings. And they all focus in on the being itself. What's at the core of us? Because what's at the core of us is at the core of everything, including the solar system. So we recognize that the power of life is everywhere. We're in it. It doesn't come from somewhere else. It comes from within us. And if you contemplate that, if you look at that and start to identify with it, I think the poet Dylan Thomas, I love a line in one of his poems. He says, "The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age." The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age. So he had a mystical moment, probably sitting outside and looking at a flower and feeling the aliveness of it and feeling his own aliveness and realizing there's only one life. There's only one power of life. And we could say there's only one God, right? Because what's more important than that life? That's the one thing that is absolutely essential. So why not use that as one of our definitions for God? The life, the light. The light is the power of life made visible. As we open up to that, things start to open up here. Our eyes start to change, which means when I say our eyes, I'm talking about the visual cortex, and the glands that are in the head begin to come out of their dormant stage. They start to open up. They wake up in this plane of manifestation, this range of vibration we call the earth. And for the first time, we start to see different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, which sounds awfully cold, I know, but if you consider that part of that, there's not just the electromagnetic spectrum, there's a spectrum of life energy. So when we look at a tree, it has a particular bandwidth, you might say. It has a particular frequency. It has a particular combination, as though it were a piece of music. Think of it in terms of sound. When we look at a discrete entity such as a tree, it's like a musical arrangement, because it has so many different frequencies of vibration that are interacting with each other in particular ways, in intelligent ways, that not only enable it to grow and be alive, but that enable it to be a particular kind of tree. You see, we live in a mind that is alive and that glows. And that living mind is intelligent beyond comprehension. And when I say intelligent, I mean, you can replace that word with pattern. There are patterns of intelligence, the patterns that enable an oak tree to be an oak tree, the patterns of intelligence that enable it to draw water out of the air, to expel water into the air, to draw it up through its trunk, to utilize photosynthesis, to interact with the sun and the seasons. All of those things are an intricate set of patterns of intelligence, all encased, you might say, within this thing we call a tree. So as we become more aware of the life all around us, then we become more aware of the life in us. And the more we become aware of the life in us, the more we become aware of the life all around us. And this is, we have this new burgeoning consciousness of the importance of the natural world. We're becoming more and more aware of our environment and our relationship to our environment and how we affect our environment and the fragility of the systems that keep the living systems, how they maintain themselves and how they maintain themselves in a broader network of systems, right? It's extraordinarily complex, but it's all alive and it has intelligence in it. So don't confuse the word intelligence with consciousness. Just like the sunflowers, we know that they're conscious, but they're not talking about what's on sale at Walmart, right? What they're conscious of is the sun. What they're conscious of is the heat in their environment. They're conscious of the seasons. They're so conscious of those things that it's hard to even separate them from those things. You see, it's like the seasons and the sunflowers are like one and the same thing. The sunflowers and the range of latitudes that they're able to grow in, they're not there by accident. They co-evolved, right? They came into being as one thing. And we can look at ourselves that way, where these bodies come from. Now, the point of all of this is to change our consciousness of this thing we call God, because that's where it starts, right? That's where it all starts. And we have such a mixed bag of definitions and theological wranglings that have done very little to help us. And what they've done mostly is to confuse and divide people, you know, by making God as something external. God is not external. God is not even internal. God is all there is. We are in God, and we are part and parcel of God. We are an expression of God. So there is no room to divide us from God, and nothing can separate us from God. So, you hear there are passages in the Bible that talk about that. So the purpose of these teachings, what we teach in the Holy Order of Man's, is these basic understandings that can lead us, that can help us experience the reality of God, and bring it out of the head into the heart, into our bodies, so that we can feel, not just feel alive, as though, like I said before, that like the body is a vat of chemicals, and we experience these chemical reactions that make us feel something. Those are secondary. All of that was set up just so that they could receive the one life and enabled it to operate through a very specific form, which is our body. But the thing that, and this is what we teach, that we are not our body. We are one with the creative intelligence that created this body. That we are inseparable from it. That when we look out at nature, for instance, we're not looking out at nature. God is looking out at nature. God is using us, our eyes, our senses, to perceive God's own self, God's own body. This layer, this level of vibration that we live in, that we call the earth plane, God wants to know it. And so God uses us as, the pictures on the walls inside the Great Pyramid of the solar disk, and with all the rays coming out of the solar disk, and at the end of each ray is a hand, right? It's a hand like this, reaching down. That's us. We are those hands. We are the way that God can touch this part of God's own creation. And so we're absolutely essential in that way, because, and also, the Michelangelo's picture of God creating Adam, God reaches, he's reaching the finger and Adam's reaching like that. What's not obvious in that picture is that it's a feedback loop. Okay? God is imparting God's own self into us, and we in turn are imparting into God the experience that we have. God sees through us. And as we become aware of that and become aware of our oneness with God, then we can see God. And there's this love union that takes place, this knowing, this sense of knowing. We know God, and we know ourselves. God knows God, and God knows us. You see, it's a two-way thing. It's like that infinity symbol. This is the aliveness of the creation. It's not just a top-down affair. This Meister Eckhart put it beautifully. He said, God needs me, right? God needs me. They wanted to kill him for it, but he outsmarted them and died before they could. God needs us. We are a channel through which God can experience God's own creation. And in our holy communion with God, then more of the possibility of what the creation wants to become is made available. You see, it's kind of like when if you're painting if you're doing a painting with brush and oils, the painting kind of tells you, after a certain, you have an idea, you start creating the idea on the canvas, but then at a certain point, the painting starts to tell you what it wants to become, right? This is the two-way street nature of the thing. If you write a story with characters in the story and you've got an idea of a plot line, but that plot line can be going along and then go whoop, take an entirely different turn from anything that you had in mind, because it's almost like the characters in the story, you want them to go south, but they want to go north, and you can't help it, right? So what I'm trying to get across to you in this is something that my favorite line in the movie Lawrence of Arabia with Peter O'Toole. He's the British officer, and he's dealing with the one of the tribal leaders in Arabia at that time, and the Arab is always saying it is written. You know, this is the way we do things. This is part of our tradition. This is the way we've always done things. And the reason we do it because it's written. And Lawrence looked at him right in the eye and said, nothing is written. Nothing is written. You see the huge implications in that. That means that we are co-creators with God. That we're not walking down a path that is carved in stone. We have the ability to change that path. And it's God's goodwill and pleasure that we exercise that choice. You see, that's why we're here. It's way better to look at life and evolution as almost like it's an experiment. It's better than experiment would be, it's a creative project. It's a story that's writing itself. It's an awareness that wants to know itself. It wants to know itself. And it wants to know the full range of what it's capable of becoming. So once we have that, once we get that within ourselves, then everything changes. We no longer look at life as like it's a dead end, you know, or like everything happens and we have no control over what happens. You know, the ideas of fate and destiny and dark destiny, that kind of thing. When we realize that we are painting the painting, you see, and that the painting is painting us, we are writing the story and the story is writing us, and that together we're exploring what is possible. This will open up centers within you that in religious terms you might call hope, right? Hope. It's not a word we use very often, but it's like this spirit that rises up within us. It's hopeful. It sees beyond itself. It's self-transcending. That is what we are. So this is one of the foundations of the teachings of the Holy Order of Man's, is this opening up in consciousness to the reality of life, and life as a power, as a living intelligence that is suffused into everything, and that it is urging itself into becoming, and it doesn't know what it's going to become. You see, that's the beauty of it. It does not know what it's going to become, because if it knew, what would be the point? It would already be there. So this is part of now, I realize this goes against, a lot of conventional ways of thinking about God being all-knowing and all-powerful and all of that. I think those beliefs limit us in our ability to open up our consciousness, because if you look at it in terms that God does not know what God can become, but that the Spirit of God is eagerly and vibrantly exploring into that, that opens you up for greater possibility. That opens up every faculty you have. Every spiritual faculty will respond to that belief. Whereas if we think of God as being all-knowing, then that shuts it off, because everything's already known. We have no say in the matter. Now, I'm not trying to introduce this as something like a new dogma or doctrine. No, just as an approach. Try approaching your experience of life and your experience of the divine moving through you in this open-ended way, you see, open-ended. And that makes everything possible. And when you realize that everything is possible, then you realize that you have a creative part to play in that. That will open you up. We talk about opening your chakras and your crown chakra and all of that. This will do it, but it'll do it naturally, just through your attitude. But if you live in fear, all of that starts to shut down, becomes encased, and you start to lose your vitality. You lose your consciousness. All you want to do is just kind of protect yourself, you see. So this is one of the basic teachings, maybe expanded a little bit. But I think if you try it, if you try taking on this kind of consciousness expansion, you might say, you open up your consciousness to these different ideas, different potentials, that you will experience more of the life energy in you, and it will rise up and seek to expand out into what we call our life. And then there's no limit to that. There's no limit. Things like synchronicity, things like miracles, things like insight, deep. I don't mean just, a great idea. I mean really a deep insight into the very nature of reality. You can't have any of those things if your idea of God is limited. God is open-ended. God has a component of unknowability, meaning that it's exploring. The scientists say that the universe is expanding. Well, just imagine that's true of the mind of God. The mind of God is expanding. It's becoming more elaborative. It's finding more and more new connections, more ways to express itself. And this is all part of the creation that we live in. We live in that band of that temporal, spatial, whatever you want to call it, where all this is happening. This is kind of like the creative edge. It's like the tip of the green shoot of a blade of grass. That's the growing part. That's where we are. We're at the growing part. We're the part of that plant that is exploring, finding a way to twirl itself around a fence post. You see, that's where we are. That's us. That's what we do. So I'll stop and you guys can ask questions or have comments. And if you want, just unmute yourself and let's talk about this. Floor is open. You can unmute yourself by going to the lower left-hand corner and clicking on the little microphone.
Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when you were saying the part about being open-ended right towards the end here, I wrote some things down, and in a way, well, not even in a way, what it does is it when we become co-creators, we begin to take responsibility. So when you're looking at something, you're looking at it from a like you said, a totally different view, because it's not God's fault that this happened or didn't, really. You're starting to realize that you are responsible for these things as well. I mean, I know there's more to it than this, but I think that answers a lot of questions. For me, it does.
Yeah. Don't turn it into an obligation, though. Don't make it like oh no, I'm responsible for everything. Right.
Well, no.
Don't go down that road.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Oh.
Because as a Catholic, that's kind of your default position, right?
Yeah.
It's all your fault.
Yeah, really. There's no way out.
Yeah, but the thing is, God is so forgiving. You see, and another way, all right, you can look at it like God is an old man in the sky, forgiving you, out of his benevolence. Oh, I know you screwed up, and it's really too bad, but I forgive you. It's like, no, the forgiveness is kind of it, like think of it as a reset button, so that at any point where you're involved in creating something, in just living your life, and you make a mistake, you can push the reset button and it all goes back to zero. And because it's not what you did, it's what you do. Mm-hmm. You see, that's the essence of God's forgiveness. It's not what you did in the past, it's what you're doing right now. You see. Mm-hmm. Creation, and this process of creation, of which we are participants in, is in a continual reset mode, where it's always in the moment. You see, always in the moment. So if you don't like the way something is going, change, do something different. And as those patterns start to elaborate themselves, they change all of the other patterns, according mm-hmm. to the intelligence of the system. Mm-hmm. So
I find that some people are afraid to make a face plant and just totally mess up, and not a major way, but because we have the opportunity to go, that didn't work out, I can do that differently. And that's the point of God expressing through us.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. Because sometimes, really cool. in order to go from A to B, you kind of have to shoot for C, right?
And you goof.
and that you're going to fall. You're going to fail. But when you fail, you learn from it, and then you reset, you pivot, you try something, you learn. It's a self-correcting process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's lovely. And you forgive yourself the way God forgives you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important. That's the part of, yeah, God forgives me, but I don't know if I can forgive myself. No.
Yeah. No. And that's kind of the slow motion version of it, you know, where you say, oh, well, I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling shameful. So I've got to forgive myself. And oh God, how do I do that? Well, let me look it up on Google or, you know, buy a book so I can learn how to forgive myself. No, just drop it, let go of it and move on.
Yeah.
You see, because if you're swept up in the creativity of life, then those concerns they're gone. They just disappear because you're not so concerned with what the disaster that just happened as you are for the new opportunity that the disaster now makes available.
Right.
You see, it's a mindset. We have two things we want to get. We want to get mindset and we want to get skill set. The skill set is knowing how to let go. That's a definite skill. Just let go of that. Okay, really screwed up. Now I know not to do that. Okay, what's next? See, don't forget the lesson because you don't want to repeat the mistake because that's just stupid, right? Not that I'm judging, but that's stupid. To make the same mistake twice is dumb, real dumb. But we all do it, so we just keep doing it until we learn not to do it.
Yeah. You're allowed to roll your eyes at yourself. Oh, there I go again.
Oh yeah. And then move on.
Oops.
You don't want to be standing in that spot when the lightning hits.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I loved about what you were saying, Michael, is that as we focus on nature and as we focus on God in everything, we get a response from God.
Yeah.
We're opening up a door of a conversation, a two-way conversation. And that is what is really cool.
Yeah.
And most people don't realize that, yeah, we pray to, we talk to, and God's like hanging out going, you want to hear anything I have to say? And you're like, yeah, cool. Okay, what was that? Who said that?
Okay, so that opens an interesting door, you know, this inner guidance thing. And this is another way we can trip over ourselves, is that we think we've got to, you know, an angel's going to come down and deliver us a message on a scroll, you know, like, you know, here's what God wants me to do, right? Look at it this way. What you're interested in, that's your guidance. What draws your attention is guiding you towards it. There is a reason why, and those reasons are deep and unknown for the most part. But if you're interested in something, it's almost a sin not to check it out. You see, that's part of your inner guidance.
Yeah, that what you said there, Michael. I love how you said that God doesn't know. Here, you know, if you know the story, but some people might not know the story. In the King Arthur stories, Merlin lived backwards. The magician, he lived backwards. And so one technique is to try to imagine it being present and whatever is calling to you, right? Whatever's calling that you're interested in, listening for that to speak to you and to guide you, and you start to get a sense of this. You step into living backwards, and what you are is calling you forth.
Yeah,
like pulling you forth.
Yeah, interesting way to look at it. Yeah. Now don't, you know, we can take this. The reason I'm presenting it this way is to kind of break through the barrier, you know, the glass ceiling that we've created for ourselves when it comes to, you know, our relationship to God. and open it up into a range, a realm of possibility and aliveness and vitality and exploration, all of that. But don't let that, in order to navigate your way through that, you kind of have to have what in literature they call the North Star. You have to have a North Star. You have to have a guiding principle in your life. And like one of those could be love, right? You don't want to do any damage either to yourself, to the environment, or to the people in your life. You want to be free, but you don't want to cause problems either. You don't want to be so free that you lose your grounding. So this is why we devote ourselves to things. We dedicate ourselves to a particular kind of life. We make a decision to live our life in a particular way. So, and those ways are like long-standing human ways of living our life, right? We have our family, we have our community, we have our country, we have, these various layers of our living experience. And we dedicate ourselves to those guiding principles. So when I say we're exploring, it doesn't mean we can explore into areas. And here's another part of our inner guidance system. We don't explore into things that we're not comfortable with in a way of conscience, right? We may not always know, we hardly ever know what to do, but we almost always know what we shouldn't do. And there's really no getting around that. If we've got false beliefs in that department, those will gradually and surely adjust themselves as we grow, right? Because we all know, we've done it ourselves. We all know people who chain themselves to kind of an artificial obligation. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things like integrity. Okay, you want to live a life of integrity. You want to live a life of honesty. And again, with honesty, you may not know what the truth is, but you damn well know what a lie is, right? We all know when we're lying. That's just kind of, we may not know what always feels good, but we sure know what doesn't feel good, right? Pain is you can't ignore pain. So these are like guiding principles that constrain us, but they constrain us in a good way, so that, it's like forgive the analogy, but I like it. It's like the barrel of a rifle constrains the bullet, and all the gases that are released when you pull the trigger of a rifle, that all of that is constrained. And because it's constrained, the bullet flies straight and it flies far. So these constraints that we place on ourselves, such as integrity, such as, listening to our conscience, these kinds of things, these principles that we live by, those constrain us, but they also enable us to go far and to hit the target. You see? The constraint is part of the program. These bodies are constraints. But if we didn't have these bodies, we couldn't do anything. Couldn't smell the flowers, you couldn't go surfing, you couldn't go to the mall, you couldn't talk to your friends, couldn't do anything. These bodies, although they constrain us in very dramatic ways, also afford us experiences we could not have otherwise. So we respect the body, but we also know that we ourselves have placed artificial constraints on ourselves, because we have focused too much on what is visible right? What we can see with these eyes, what we can hear with these ears, we've put those constraints on ourselves that limit us in artificial ways and keep us from seeing what's really here. You know, like children have invisible play, invisible friends, and we say, no, those are just imaginary. You know, forget that, and we make them grow up, right? So they lose that faculty. It's happened to every one of us. And and we have to, and it's not because of mean old mom and dad, you know, being bad to us and cutting off our spirituality, you know. No, it's part of the maturation process, because part of being here, we have to fully establish the constraints that these bodies are, so that these bodies can function at their very best in this domain that they're a part of. You see, the constraints are good. Those constraints are good because they afford us a range of opportunities and experiences we would not have otherwise. So life, and the whole point behind what I'm telling you now is that life is good. Even the restrictions, the pain, the difficulties, everything we experience here is for our good. We just don't want to have too much good. Right. I'm for short suffering. You know, this long suffering business. No, shorter the better. I have made unbelievably stupid mistakes in my life, and you know, I've never met anyone who can't say the same. But I don't dwell on them. I learn from them. You know, the worst train wreck can produce something good, right? Because maybe a barrier was there, something was keeping us from evolving further in our own personal consciousness. There was a barrier there, and the disaster, the catastrophe, the dumb move, whatever it was, broke through that barrier, left us in tatters, left us completely destroyed. But out of those ashes, we're able to rise with the original spirit that was driving us in the first place. That phoenix bird can then rise out of the ashes and fly and find a new form in which to express itself. You see? So even physical death is like that, because this is not the only time we're going to be here. It's not the only time we've been here, and we will be here God knows how long. This is, you know, and this is one of the fundamental teachings of the Holy Order of Mans, is that we've lived many lives, and we will live many lives. And frankly, it's hard for me to get my head wrapped around the idea that people who think that this is it, I can't even imagine that. I mean, what would it be like to really believe that this is your one and only shot? You know, that no wonder the world is so screwed up. You know, if you think that, it's like, you know, just doesn't make any sense to me.
Me neither.
And I don't care who I was in the past. You know, you talk to how many Cleopatras have you talked to, or Solomon's, you know, even Jesus Christ's, you know. There's one on every corner if you people were really honest. Yeah. I don't care about that. I have no concern at all with who I was. I am damned concerned about who I'm going to be next time and the time after that. I'm really concerned about that. See,
you know, when you mentioned a train wreck, I saw, you know, whenever there's a train wreck or a car accident, heroes appear. People become heroes and help others. And they may never have that opportunity except in that instant. All of a sudden they see something, they stop, they take care of things. And all this good comes out of a person that they didn't know existed within them. So train wrecks bring out that in people, heroes.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Even something as barbaric, what we consider to be barbaric, as war. right? I mean, that's one that, you know, most people cannot accept. That's like beyond the pale. But even there, and this was really well illustrated in the Bhagavad Gita, even there, what does that afford us? What opportunities, what possibilities does that open up? Heroism, one thing, sacrifice, camaraderie, pulling together, getting real. You know, there's nothing like playing a game that has dire consequences if you lose. Right? I mean, that's just it. And you know, from a certain perspective, you know, in consciousness, you look down at the earth and you can see a bunch of people, but honestly, you can't tell which ones are in a body and which ones are not in a body, right? Because life and death seems to occupy this very narrow range, and you go out of it and you come back into it, you go out of it, come back into it. But from a distance, it looks like it's all the same. So why would God be concerned whether we live or die? It's, to God, it's just not that big a deal, right? I have a weird sense of humor. I laugh at such things.
Well, we all
but to
know
me,
that.
it's
But
really
we love you
funny.
anyway.
Oh, good. So the point of that is so that, you know, the one, and this is part of a skill set, is to not take yourself too seriously, not take the circumstances of your life too seriously, because one thing we can say about all these circumstances of our lives is that they are temporary and they are continually changing. I get attached to something like that. You see, that's kind of the essence of Buddhism. Don't get attached to this stuff, because it's here today and it's gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? That's where suffering comes in, where you think, oh, it shouldn't be this way. Then what else is there left except suffering? But when you just let it be what it is, and then, but see, that also frees you up to then, you know, find the rocks and walk across the river. You know, if you're too busy hanging on, then you're going to be run over by freight trains all the time. You know, but if you're quick on your feet and you realize everything's changing all the time, then you can change ahead of it.
Quick on your feet. I think that's a good one.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I think a little bit past it. So
that was delightful. Thank you, Michael.
You're very welcome.
It's a great class.
My pleasure.
Great class.
Yeah.
I wish I knew how to, you know, write bullet points, and I think I stayed.
You'll figure it out. I know.
Pretty much on a general theme. It's big. It's so big.
Yeah, it's the entire universe. Well, there's that.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, it's a pleasure, and I'm glad to see all of you here. And
look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah. And all right, a little plug. Check out my website, michaelmaciel.com. Lots of good stuff there, and there's more good stuff coming soon. I always say that, soon, you know. but it is. So, and be well, be good.
You
Live
too.
well.
You
Thank
too.
you so much.
Michael.
All right.
Nice to see everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.